social good consulting firm, and we do consulting and facilitation with nonprofits, social enterprise businesses, small businesses, and government entities. And we focus on community-centered strategic planning and community engagement process and evaluation. And we do facilitation of communities of practice and nonprofit workshops.
So can you break that down, say, as
there's a lot of big words. Yeah. What do y'all do?
Break that down in terms of, say, like the Albuquerque Community Foundation approaches you and they want some direction on handling a project. Then I'm sure you ask first, okay, what is the project, right? That'd be the first.
Yeah. I'm gonna let Eileen answer that. She's really focusing on our New Mexico nonprofit service right now. So I'll let Eileen talk about that.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say a lot of our work is really focused on doing things that support nonprofits and all of the ways that nonprofits need support from consultants and facilitators, but through a community-centered lens. So one way I'll share this is strategic planning. So that's something that we hear from nonprofits on a regular basis, every 3 to 5 years, going through a strategic planning process. And we really like to bring this spin in of how do we actually flip the power dynamics of strategic planning and go straight to communities and understand what the needs are of communities, and then how that nonprofit organization can use their programs and projects and offerings to better support communities. And I will say this, especially for strategic planning, because it's something that people come to us a lot seeking support on, is my own experience with strategic planning is it tends to be pretty boring. By the end of the process, we all just want to run out of the room. Like, are we done with this? Let's go.
Right.
I mean, it's true, right? Like, haven't we all had that experience of like, isn't this process over? And doing community-centered strategic planning is just, it's a whole other feel. It's a little bit slower than traditional strategic planning, but it's amazing to sit in conversations with communities and really get to the heart of what do you really need and how can we support you and how can we do better? And the results are much greater impact than for the world.
Yeah. I mean, it does really take a gifted, experienced hand to be able to guide an organization through that, I think. And like any small business, right? You can't run it by yourself. No organization is going to run itself. And having an outside group like yours come and walk them through that logistics is tremendously beneficial.
Yeah, it's we've all been through it. Eileen and I are both former executive directors of nonprofit organizations, and we've been through that process of strategic planning with our own organizations and in other ways as board members too in the community. And it can be a process that, puts, as Eileen said, the power in the hands of the board of directors to know what the stakeholders really need. But instead, by flipping the power dynamics and going straight to the community and asking them, what do they want? What do they need? Who are the partners? We can really inform more of the process, more of the organization, and really have the staff involved in a different way than just, here's your plan, go do it.
Right.
And, check off your objectives and your tasks, right? So we really get to the heart of organizations through that community-centered lens.
And really tap into the things that are exciting for all of us, like being creative and not just getting stuck in the ways that things have always been done.
Yeah.
Right. So do you guys have an example of somebody that you've worked with that you could share with us? Like I want to hear in a little more concrete, because my brain is still a little foggy on what it is. You know what I'm saying? Explain to me. Yeah. Sorry. And use an example. So I want to hear juicy stuff.
Yeah. So do the listeners.
Right.
And I guess maybe I'll jump in, Vicki, and you can add on to this. And I don't want to only get stuck on strategic planning either, because I
Right,
think
right.
all of our work is rooted in how do we center communities in anything that we're doing. And that's true for nonprofits, and that's true for the work that we do with social enterprises, which is more Vicky's area of expertise as well, and supporting local economies as well. So one of our clients that we love to highlight is Girls Incorporated of Santa Fe. And they came to us, we really want to do strategic planning in a different way. And so a great example is having a youth serving or an organization that serves youth on a regular basis. We need to go to the youth first and have youth voice be the center of the process.
Imagine that.
Would be a no duh, right? Yeah.
I know it sounds so simple, but where do you see this? That's often not the case, especially when it comes to youth voice. Because people think, well, youth don't know as much. Well, youth know what's going on and they know what they need. You just need to give them space to express that. And so we hosted a series of activities that we worked with the Girls Incorporated staff, and they worked directly with the girls and the youth to better understand their needs, their dreams, their visions of what could be possible. And then we brought adults into the conversation and really had the adults reflect on what the youth was saying to start pulling themes out, and then moved out wider to the staff and the board through the process. Vicky, what would you like to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add, I just really loved that whole conversation we had where the grown-ups in the room really had time to reflect on what the youth had given back to us as feedback. So it was in the form of they had written their thoughts down on what are called little thought bubbles, like that you can post up on the wall, right? Or post-it notes or whatever. And they did it as a project. And so the youth voice was in the room, but they weren't there bodily, right? We had that information from them. And the thoughts that came up with the grown-ups in the room who said, oh my gosh, to have it literally in their handwriting, for me to look at that and take it in and reflect on it is so powerful and so engaging. And okay, now how do we deal with this information that we just got here, and how do we reflect on it? And, some great questions came up out of it. Some great ideas came forth from it. And I think it changed some of those adults in that space to say, you know what? The youth actually do know what's going on, and maybe we should respect that a little bit more. So we didn't intend for that to be the purpose of that conversation, but that was kind of a byproduct of it, which I think was really lovely and very informative of what a community engaged process can really look like.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm sure there was quite a bit of, so they
Yeah.
did think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that or I
Yeah.
didn't even know that this was important to them. Yeah.
Right. And we're all stuck in our own generational thinking too, right? Of like how I grew up as a kid, what I did as a kid, how I was educated or whatever, or lack of resources that I had as a kid. We're stuck in our own little tape loop of what we know about being a kid. And for them to hear that directly in the moment from today, right now, what's happening, it was a big deal for sure.
Wow. That must have been really empowering for the organization.
It was, yeah. And it was a year-long process. And, what came out of it for them was some recommendations for some internal work that they wanted to engage in, and some external work as well, and kind of preparing for the future and preparing for possible expansion of their programs and into serving other communities, and thinking about how to continue to engage the youth voice in that forward-thinking program process.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. So flip to the other side of that. And
Sure.
what about businesses?
Yeah. So my background is actually coming from, I was, as I said, I was an executive director, but I ran a nonprofit organization that was focused on locally owned independent businesses and local economic development here in Santa Fe. It was called the Santa Fe Independent Business Alliance. And from that came really learning about social enterprise, social good businesses, ones that really cared about paying the living wage, cared about where they were sourcing from, cared about how they treated their employees, how they interacted with community, how they gave back to community, and really engaging with them in a way to say, how can you be a better business in the community? How do you serve better? How do you treat your employees better? So we ran what is called then a buy local campaign to really educate consumers about really buying local, from local products, from local manufacturers, from locally owned businesses, and what that multiplier effect is in the community. Fast forward, in 2012, I started my own consulting company called Prospera Partners, and for me, it was about serving the businesses themselves. I really wanted to work with them in doing the social good work. Didn't want to really run a nonprofit anymore because that's a whole other ball game. I wanted to do the work of doing social good consulting with these businesses. So strategic planning for the business of how do you incorporate what's a triple bottom line, which is how do you really impact people in your business, the planet in your business, and have an income and a profit, or prosperity. I like to call it prosperity. So a triple bottom line being people, planet, prosperity. And thinking through all those different ways and strategies to do that. So marketing strategies, press, PR, all that kind of thing. And who's your target for all of those things?
Right.
And how do you be a better business and connecting them to the resources? And we also serving social enterprises and business owners in communities of practice and having them come together to talk about shared best practices of how they're doing business and how they're doing good business. And I've worked with farmers and restaurant owners and chefs in the local food system and bringing them together to talk about how they grow the economy for local food and agriculture in northern New Mexico. We worked in Nogales, Arizona, Newark, New Jersey, with a food systems enterprise project there. Detroit as well with another food enterprise project for economic development. So we've done a lot of that work in that space, in the food systems work and in other social enterprises as well, just serving their own communities in whatever ways they can.
Wow. And so you're not just limited to New Mexico. You can support clients all over the country then.
Yeah, we've worked all over the country and Puerto Rico, actually.
Oh, wow.
Last summer I had a great chance and trip to work in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So it was great. Agricultural program there for economic development.
Wow.
Have you seen, pandemic wise and past, or is there are more people paying attention to these things now than they were, or are you seeing more or less awareness?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to say yes. And I think that it was happening, but the consciousness was raised because we became so locally focused during the pandemic of, oh my gosh, I have to support my neighbors who are business owners. I have to support my local store, which is right down the road. It's close. I know that they're safe. I know that they have all of the right safety precautions in place to support, the health of my community. And therefore we did think about those things. It was interesting to me that the pandemic made us so much more socially conscious. Well, some of us, but not all of us, but some of us, much more socially conscious without ever putting a label on it and saying, I want to support my community. We saw folks who were ready to help feed their community, make sure that people had what they needed in those moments. We saw a lot more of the mutual aid kind of organizations that really rose to the surface to help people and sprout up to figure out how do we get together and pull our resources and do what we need to do for real social impact and making sure that people are taken care of. And so that to me was just the real upside from the pandemic that has continued in some ways. And I think people got very real about, oh, I can keep doing this work. I can actually make this a part of my business.
That's something that we've seen time and time again is people implementing something by, forced to implement something and then realizing, oh, gee, we can keep doing this. It can be part of our future plan. It's something as simple as, to-go boxes at
Yeah.
restaurants that they'd never done that before, never had
Mhm.
prepped meals where you could walk in, pick it up,
Yep.
and leave, and realizing, wow, that's a really good thing to have, and incorporating it into the business plan going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just this morning in my inbox had an article about restaurants that are really shifting because of the pandemic, and some of them staying with the counter service, but still offering fine dining. So you
Mhm.
order at a counter and you are served at your table, but you don't have a waiter, right? So they've cut back on staff in ways that make sense to them financially, but they're still serving a higher end product, and they're still providing really quality service without having that tableside service that we're so sometimes demanding of. I happen to love counter service, at all ends of the spectrum in terms of the price points. I really do appreciate counter service in that way. So that was an interesting article to read this morning about how they're sort of reinventing because of the pandemic, and wanting to figure out how do you do this now differently, because so many people left the service industry.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think it also impacted, sorry to
oh, no, please. Yeah.
it impacted the use of to-go containers.
Mhm.
I noticed so many restaurants going to more biodegradable
Sure.
containers
Mhm.
instead of styrofoam,
Mhm.
which
Right.
or tinfoil kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring in a yes and to all of
Yeah.
this too. And this
Mhm.
Vicky and I do this all the time of holding multiple truths. So how do we hold two things or more all at the same time? And bringing communities back in, and the idea of restaurants changing things, and then it might mean that there's servers who are out of jobs. And the systems that are at play also in our world, that when I think about communities, especially communities in New Mexico, there are a lot of people who are really suffering in this moment right now because of the failure of systems. So I think yes to more awareness, yes to some amazing changes that are going on, and we need more
Mhm.
and more policies and more support from government that really gets to helping people in communities that have been more impacted by the last 4
Right.
years than others.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember some conversations that we had as a team about some of those issues. I, who knows what year it was that we had this, but it was definitely during the pandemic.
We all lost a
Around,
couple
We
years
don't
there,
know
you're
what
good.
year was
Yeah.
what. Yeah.
but the skilling up or the transferable skills from the service industry that people then could figure out, oh, I could actually work from home because I have such great customer service skills, or now I can just learn some technical skills
Yeah.
to be on my computer to provide customer service in a different way. And so I think that that's another shift in our whole system. People went from the gig economy to the working at home economy, and working from home, the remote economy.
Mhm.
People were out there gigging like crazy, right? Driving for all the different delivery services, doing
Mhm.
all sorts of different things. And that really kind of collapsed in some ways too.
Right, right, and we went through so many changes, and in the end, it kind of leveled out because the
Mhm.
unemployment rate is pretty healthy right now, and so I think, it's interesting it's interesting to watch the progress of how things happen, and it was
Mhm.
fascinating talking to businesses all during that time period to see how they all
Yeah.
individually had to pivot, for lack of a better word, um,
Mhm.
to be able to continue to do their business. Like, um, what we had one business that was a um, yoga, and they went to online classes.
Mhm.
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 Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
continue
that's
doing it even when you could go back in. They found a
yeah.
lot of people were just excited about,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could do naked yoga in my living room if I
Right.
wanted to, but I could
Yeah.
go
I mean,
yoga, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yes. yes to naked yoga, and people also have accessibility issues
That's right.
Yeah,
that
that
they
too.
wouldn't
Right.
have been able to attend a yoga class, and this
Right.
provided probably them an opportunity to access yoga in a way that they hadn't ever been able to before. Like, how amazing is that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I really loved about the pandemic in some ways was that
There's a
the
sentence I didn't think I'd hear. But
the accessibility of so many things by being online, and so many folks
Mhm.
jumped on it and said, "Oh, I'm going to learn how to do Zoom. I'm going to learn how to connect with my family and friends via, the I figured out during the pandemic how to add somebody to my FaceTime. So you can do more than one person on a FaceTime. I had no idea. So
That's
I was
great.
so used to Zooming, but my
Right.
family doesn't do Zoom. So, some of us said, "Hey, I'm going to step it up a minute here and figure this out." So it brought us closer together in some ways,
Right.
reconnecting with family and friends in some ways that we didn't expect. It made things more accessible. It made programs more accessible for us, some of our workshops and things that we were offering.
Mhm.
And it's still something that a lot of our clients really appreciate, that we still do a lot of virtual work with our clients.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Speaking of clients, do you have an ideal? I mean, is there
Oh, that's a good question.
Who's your
Budgets.
avatar?
A client with a budget helps.
Yeah, well, yeah.
definitely?
There's that. Yep.
Yeah, there's a great meme out there floating around in the interverse out there, that's like, "What's your budget? Well, what's your price? What's your budget? What's your price?" Like, it's always the who's on first conversation, right?
Right.
So yeah, the means to actually get the work done is always an ideal client.
Mhm.
And that means not just the financial means, but the capacity. And especially when we're working with nonprofits, we want to make
Mm,
sure that they have the resources to either slow down some other work, take the time to be in multiple meetings, take the time to be in these community centered conversations that we're going to host, and put
good
out
point.
the information that needs to be done. So we want to make sure that they have the capacity to do that work as well. Um, and then on the business side, business owners, social enterprise, entrepreneurs, they're very busy.
Mhm.
They need the they need the support of being sort of scheduled. I definitely say, okay, I want to make sure that you have the time to be able to be in a consistent scheduled meeting time with me so that we can stay on top of things and I can provide you with your homework and you bring it back too. So it's
Right.
ideal capacity. Hmm.
We actually have a blog post that talks about how people come to us asking for an oil change. It's like this whole description around like how people have something that they're not quite sure that they think they need an oil change. So they come to us and they're like, "Hey, can you do an oil change for us?" And then we get in there and we're like, actually you might need a new transmission or something that's different than what you thought you needed. So anyway, we have a blog post about that. And really the gist of it is, I think, and some amount of clarity around what you really need, but an
Mhm.
openness that when we
Hmm.
get in, we're probably going to find something else. And we're not going to shy away from saying, here's where there might be a better investment. And we don't shy away from clients too of saying, you might not be ready yet.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So here's some things that we think that would be a better investment for you to do first. And then let
Right.
us know when you're ready.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotta get rid of Bob. Bob's been here too long. It's time for Bob to retire, and then we can talk. So, yeah, right?
Yeah, there are plenty of
There's
those
that too.
conversations too. Yeah, yeah. Or, do you have a job description for that new position that you're going to need to hire? Okay, we can help you with that.
Right, right.
Yeah. Or maybe it's time to retool after Bob leaves the
Right.
organization and rethink that whole
Yeah,
position, and maybe it's 2 people that you're hiring.
Right.
Yeah.
who aren't
Mhm.
103.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
We
that
also
was
like to work with really creative thinkers. So
right.
clients that really want to be creative in how they approach things,
Mhm.
really open-minded, and the thoughtfulness of wanting to do this work in partnership with us. That's why I called my company Prospera Partners. We want to be in partnership with our clients to do the work together. We co-create with them.
Mhm.
We walk through it with them.
Right.
Right. And they have to be at least a bit socially minded, right? Because that's kind of your leaning.
Yeah,
So they have to be open to hearing that too, right? Like this might
absolutely.
not be the best thing for your community that you're in. Or if you go slightly this way, it's going
Right.
to be way more impactful, and they have to be open to that conversation.
Yeah. And I love the kind of clients that have no real words for it, but they just say, I want to serve my community. I want to make sure that the folks who I really want to sell to or offer services to are taken care of. And they have no words for what social enterprise is. I love those folks. Bring them in because it's a great opportunity to educate and they have nothing to unlearn. So I love those
There is
folks.
that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so how can people find you if they would like to take advantage of the services that you offer?
We are everywhere. We are online. We are online at prosperapartners.org, right there on the bottom of your screen. Yes, I love that. And we are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We
You
are
can find
on
us both
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. Yeah.
LinkedIn. And we do have a podcast as well called Impact Out Loud. And you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, including this one. So we love to hang out with other people though. So I'm really, really glad that we were here today.
Yeah, we are too. Thank you. Yeah.
And Pam and Erica, I have a question for you two.
Sure.
So listening and being in all these conversations that you've been in, what piece of advice or guidance can you give us from trends or something that you've been learning from all these podcasting sessions that you've hosted over the last 4 years?
Well, Pam, and so the word that through the whole pandemic was pivot. It's really funny.
Pivot.
Everybody goes to friends, pivot. But it really was that. So I would say for a business owner to be open to that pivot, right? So if you want to stay in business, and now we saw this a lot in the pandemic too. There were people who were like, all right, that's my sign. I'm out. Right. And we lost droves of doctors and people and who were just like, okay, that's my sign to retire. I'm out. But there were a lot of people who said, oh, holy crap. Now what? And they put their thinking cap on and they pivoted. Whatever it was that they needed to survive to survive the pandemic. That was, so I would say for a business owner, you can't put your blinders on. You have to pay attention and you have to be willing to pivot if you want to keep your business alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And be open-minded and ask for help. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Ask for help because we cannot do it all, particularly as women, where we want to, we think, oh, we're superpowers and we're going to accomplish everything, but you can't. It's just not realistic.
Yep.
There's some good unlearning that can happen there.
Yeah.
About all the conditioning that we're told.
Right.
As women.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the generational thing cracked me up too, because I'm Gen X and we've been flying under the radar. We've been flying under the radar for decades, right? Nobody even
not anymore.
We're forgotten. We're not even listed most of the time.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm okay with that. That's great.
Everybody's like, well, boomers and millennials, and we're over here going,
right.
And so, but now we've been outed big time.
That's right.
People are like, how come you're drinking out of the hose? Weren't you allowed in the house? We're like, no. Things like that. And it's really interesting now that my generation is now being talked about, to see how many women in power, if you'd like, how many of us have actually been doing it for a long time. And we've just been like, shh, let them fight. We're just going to get business done.
That's right.
It's been very interesting.
And we are the Gen Xers. We are now running the world. I mean, our vice president, Kamala Harris, is a Gen Xer. So kudos to her.
But she was a latchkey kid too, right?
She sure was. I was a latchkey kid. Holy moly, was I a latchkey kid.
I've said, yes. If I'd ever disappeared when I was a kid, my parents wouldn't even have known where to start looking for me, right?
And maybe Vicki, we should add the tagline: Prospera Partners powered by Gen X.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yes.
Yeah.
100% yes.
awesome. That's at least a
Yeah.
social media post,
There
Yeah,
you go.
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
That's
lean
true.
into that because that's it's power now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that
It
we're
is.
out from behind the curtain. We've been
true.
outed. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Eileen, and
Yes.
Vicky, for joining us on the podcast this afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you. This was so
you.
much fun.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Yeah. Thank
Be
you.
Thanks so
safe,
much.
everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please keep listening to this podcast.